Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. It's Claire Moon, and we're going to be talking about September 2025. So let me see. We have a chat at the right-hand side of your screen. If you're here live, you can always interact with me there. Um, excuse me. You can always ask me questions there. So I'm going to be going through all of the weather for September, the astrology weather. I'm not going to cover every single date, but if there's a date that you want me to look at that I didn't go over, please let me know in the chat. Otherwise, you can always leave notes in the comments if you're hitting this up later, listening to the recording afterwards. You can always ask me questions below in the comments. You can find all of my work. I'm a full-time astrologer. You can find my work at www.aligninglightastrology.com. That's where I have all my booking, my writings, all my events, past podcast appearances, all of those things. And if you want to learn more about me as an astrologer or a person, it's all over there. Um, I don't really have anything new. I'm really behind in life. I really wanted, but by this time I was doing this forecast, I wanted to have a video out about the Virgo eclipses, the Virgo Pisces eclipses. I didn't get there. And then, I mean, originally I wanted to have them out before that kind of eclipse light that we had on August 23rd. I didn't get it out there either. So if you can all hang in there, I'm not going to go over the eclipses as much as I might usually today on the 7th and the 21st of September. But if you want to hang in there like 36 hours, I'm going to have a big old piece of content hot off the press. So I'm going to make my eclipse video. I'm just editing it. I have like 2 hours left of editing to do, and then I'll have it up. But it's really behind, so I apologize. Although I was kind of wondering, I was curious, like it wasn't, again, my idea to wait until after that August 23rd new moon that we had in Virgo, but I'm kind of glad that I did because that was relevant and remarkable and noticeable for me at least. And I do think it is going to tie into those eclipses. So it's kind of nice to have seen that, I think, too, to get an idea, to get a pulse on what's going on. Um, but yeah, with that, I'm going to talk about some old business first. So we're going to reflect a little bit on July. And then I'm going to do my usual list of dates. We'll look at some overall thoughts for the month ahead, and then we'll get into all the details for September. So I'm seeing some people here. Working out many frogs in my throat. I'm kind of a late riser. My antidepressant makes me pretty eepy sleepy in the morning. So this is pretty much my morning. Good morning. It's noon where I am. Hello, Jason. Hello, Will. I cannot believe it is already September. This is my last part of my quarter 3 document of my notes. And I was like, shit, we gotta go to the quarter 4 document next month. Unreal. Uh, yeah, lately, like the last few years, we've had not necessarily September, but October, we've had eclipses. So this has been like September, October has been the eclipsy part of the year for a while. Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with that eclipse video. So far so good. It ended up being 3 hours long. Like I did not mean for it to be that long. And it's because each of the rising sign horoscopes is like, I mean, Aries was kind of short. That was like 5 minutes, but I did like tw 10 to 12 minutes on each sign. I usually don't do that much. So definitely like it's gonna be good. And while we're here talking about eclipses, something that I really wanted to drill down was some technical stuff about it. And for this, I'm going to reference really quickly on the Heavenly Spheres by Elena Avalar and Luis Ribeiro. But they talk about, and I saw this echoed on Kelly Surtees' website, for a solar eclipse, we want the sun to be within 18 degrees of the nodes. And so, for instance, that one that we just had, so yeah, let's just go right to old business. Let's talk about August, yeah, August. Let's talk about August. On the 23rd, right at 0 degrees, 23 arc minutes. So, like 17 degrees and some change away. And so technically, I don't know, it's within solar eclipse territory, but I've been calling it like solar eclipse light, diet, caffeine free. Not the strongest because of course the closer those luminaries are going to get to the nodes, the more complete the occultation, the more complete the eclipse that we're going to have. Now the other two in September are within that 18 degrees, but then for lunar eclipses, in this book. They say 12 and a half degrees. We want the moon in a full moon to be within 12 and a half degrees of the lunar nodes. And so this one here on the 7th of September, we've got the moon, the full moon within 3 degrees of the lunar nodes. So definitely an eclipse. But yeah, I wanted to just note that because this is kind of odd that we have like essentially three, two and barely, 2.5 eclipses. I don't know, whatever we want to call it. But I do think that that new moon that we just had was special. And so we'll talk about it. I talked about it a little bit last month, of course, so let me just repeat a couple things. It was square Uranus. I think that was the biggest note. And then as well, beyond that kind of, okay, already eclipses are not super stable. Then we've got a square from Uranus, further destabilizing, further electrifying, making this even kind of higher energy than it already is. So that wasn't a stabilizing factor whatsoever. I know a lot of times with the sun and Uranus in a square, that can speak to these feelings of wanting to be really expressive and independent and authentic and to just be ourselves and not be held back. But then that whole thing being amplified by being part of this eclipse journey that we're on now. Another good thing to note is that that new moon that we had on the 23rd, it was not beheld by either malefic, and so that helped for the vibes to be better, for things to be more stable. And then additionally, we've got both benefics here, Jupiter and Venus, who were able to see this by sign and offer that stability. So certainly not the worst sky I've ever seen for an eclipse to happen. The ruler of the eclipse could not see it, Mercury. And as you will see in my eclipse video, we have a lot of mutual exchanging of signs. We have one mutual reception. So yeah, it's not simple. It's not just a straightforward, hey, it's going to be about Virgo and it's going to be about the house topics that Virgo is for you. The meanings of this eclipse, I think, for each of us is going to expand into other life topics, particularly those of Leo in the case of this August 23rd one. And for the end of September, it's going to be more Libra. So it's not Virgo in a vacuum. Usually I could do that with a new moon because they're both in here, but it's a little bit more than that. So did anyone notice? I just want to stop for a second while I have a couple people here. Did anyone notice anything on the 23rd? And it's okay if you didn't or around then. I did. But also, I mean, maybe it's good to know, and this is a good caveat for how best to use this forecasting information every month, but we have different planets that are activated during different years of our life. So there's all these timing techniques. Transits is the one we're most familiar with, but there are all these other timing techniques that help us to understand why certain years eclipses might be louder for some of us and others not so much. Likewise, with Mercury retrogrades, perhaps those are louder for some of us some years based on like the other timing things like annual profections, for instance. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But all to say, when I ask, did you notice anything? Sometimes it's going to be a no, and sometimes that's fine. But I did, and I can share a little bit about what I noticed, but all right. Yeah. So what I noticed, it was very much that classic wanting to express myself a little bit more fully, wanting to expand how I'm sharing myself with the world a little bit in a more authentic way, and feeling kind of frustrated that I hadn't really made it to where I wanted to in that regard. And then I still feel like I'm not as quite out there and authentic and loudly me as I would like to be. And so I did notice that. And for me, I mean, this is in my places of fifth house self-expression and eighth house other people's resources and sharing and interfacing with others. Leo is my seventh house of other people. So it's about others for me and how I interface with others and express myself. For someone who is, say, an actual Gemini rising, like this chart is showing, this is more going to have to do with their third or fourth houses, and maybe there's themselves. So their home, their private life, their family life, their own land, their home, their dwelling. But as you know, as well, this set of eclipses in Virgo might also be hearkening to something about neighbors, communities, local spaces, especially in August. So could be a lot of things that go beyond Virgo, but I was noticing that. Now, just to kind of close this loop, the next eclipse, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's going to be that full moon in Pisces for the month. And then our new moon for the month of September is the solar eclipse in Virgo. So we'll circle back around to that. But first, let's tackle a little bit more old business, because we had at the beginning of August, we had the Saturn-Mars opposition perfect, and that perfected around the 8th, 9th of August. What I noticed over on my end was a lot of busyness in people around me, in my own life, just a lot going on. Mars was having a lot to do, maybe running into some delays or challenges or overwhelm around that. And then at the same time, let me actually go back to the date itself. At that same time, we had this beautiful Venus-Jupiter conjunction that was looking down upon this opposition between malefics. And so, again, not the worst sky. Like, we have this other part of the planetary team helping to stabilize what's going on with Saturn and Mars here. And I did see that, people were having fine times. It wasn't catastrophic. This Mars-Saturn opposition, in most cases I was seeing, it was pretty run-of-the-mill, just busy, kind of irritating couple weeks. But also some good notes, some happy notes, some soft notes happening, maybe at the same time. Another way that this can play out is that if there is something sour, it's made slightly sweeter. Or if there is something sweet, perhaps it got a little soured that first week of August. So kind of either two different things in a mixed bag, or these types of benefic, malefic things mixing together in various ways. I was kind of noticing all of those. One of the little quick stories I had was that my neighbor's neighbor had a bad day at work, or someone had a bad day at work. I don't think it was him, but someone hid a crate full of Kringle, which is a really delicious baked good. It was a crate full of cherry and almond Kringle, and someone stabbed it with a forklift, and it compromised the whole batch, I guess, by company standard. And so they just gave it away free to all the employees. And so then I got some of that trickle down Kringle. I got some Kringle from a neighbor who got it from their neighbor. So someone had a really bad day at work, but guess who got free Kringle? Me. So that was one thing that happened that week. It was kind of a neutral, but definitely mixed bag story. And I also heard a lot of people disappointed by this benefic conjunction between Jupiter and Venus. So, Jupiter and Venus, they are benefics. They represent all of the, usually the more favorable things in life. So, Jupiter being goodwill, understanding, stability, growth, expansion, opportunity. Venus being connection, relationship, love, beauty, kittens, puppies, soft things, sensual pleasures, yum yums, if you will, joy, delights, gift giving, all of these lovely things together. But what I think we don't, I don't know, maybe we take it for granted, and we, as in, I don't know who we is. We all have different things we take for granted. It depends on the person. But, maybe I think it's safe to say that some of us take some things for granted more than others. And, in more of a political sense, or just like a sociological sense, understanding privilege and all the ways that I just don't have difficult things going on. So sometimes the benefics can show that just it looks like nothing is happening, but really it's that no harm is happening. There's not a bad thing happening. It's negating a bad thing or it's protecting from a bad thing. It's the same idea as preventative medicine or herd immunity. When we all get vaccinated, it looks like nothing is happening. And that's why it's really hard to sell people on preventative medicine. So this is what the benefics feel like to me sometimes. They bring stability, they bring homeostasis, and we take that homeostasis for granted. We take that stability for granted sometimes because again, it looks like nothing is happening. And I think sometimes that's what they do. I don't think it always is like a sensual pleasure or a lottery ticket or some big break or opportunity. And I think we need to remember this and actually appreciate it and not, and see, hopefully understand that and be like, huh, oh, that's great, instead of being disappointed by it. Um, yeah, I'm gonna not get into my old man, get off my lawn speech on that. I'll leave it at there. But a lot of people were disappointed with the benefics, and I wanted to give that other angle. Okay. What else with older July stuff? So I think that's it. I think that pretty much covers it. The dates of interest. So the main dates, I'm gonna throw a couple extra ones in here. Uh, Actually, Mercury. Let's just talk about Mercury for 1 second, though. So on August 27th, Mercury disappeared from the morning sky. So that was just a couple days ago. And this is approximate because when a planet disappears behind the beams or makes their phasis appears out of the beams, that's going to depend on your atmosphere, your horizon, your location on the globe, a lot of different things that I don't have the software or the brain to understand. Um, but anyway, around August 27th, Mercury went under the beams of the sun. Mercury is actually going to be out of visibility. They're not going to be visible for the entire month of September, which is kind of interesting. Usually that's not a good condition for Mercury. And so buying, selling, communicating, traveling, dealing with information, that stuff can get kind of fraught usually when Mercury's under the beams. And so, the best times I would say this month, we want to wait till Mercury gets into Virgo. And that's going to be, oh, what did I say? The 4th through the 17th of September, the 4th through the 17th of September. This is when Mercury is going to have their little umbrella, their chariot, and they're protected by the beams a bit. So do your Mercury things between the 4th and 17th of September. And then we're going to get Mercury coming out on the other side of this. And that's going to be on the 2nd-ish of October. So if we go to there, we'll see Mercury on the other side, 15 degrees away from the sun. That's our convention. But yeah, I noticed they're going to be gone. They're going to be out of sight all month. Now, when Mercury is out of sight and under the beams, often what they are trying to communicate information, sharing of understanding with Mercury, sharing of information or traveling or buying or selling, those things aren't happening as easily, or they're happening more quietly, but there is certainly notes of a lack of efficacy. These things aren't working as well, or we can't see them. So getting information, getting details, getting facts, we might have to work a little harder in September. At the same time, I'm not too worried about it because a lot of September, Mercury is going to be in their own domicile, and I think most of this is going to be fine. But that's the Mercury report. But yeah, other dates of interest. We've got on the 1st of September, Saturn re-entering Pisces. And that'll be our last bit of Saturn in Pisces. On the 2nd, we have Mercury entering Virgo. On the 5th, we have Uranus stationing retrograde. On the 7th of September, our lunar eclipse in Pisces. On the 13th, Mercury cazimi. On the 18th, Mercury enters Libra. On the 19th, Venus is entering Virgo. On the 21st, we have a Virgo solar eclipse. On the 22nd, we have Sun entering Libra and Mars entering Scorpio. So big vibe shift on the 22nd. And then the 24th, we have a Mars-Pluto square. So kind of a random one at the end there, but that's important to note. The most action this month to me happens between the 16th and the 25th. A lot of planets, so kind of a general thing for the month ahead. A lot of planets have to move through as they move through this first part of Virgo. So the sun just did it. Venus and Mercury still need to do it. They're going to square Uranus. So planets have to do that. Mars already did that a while ago. And then when they get to the end of Virgo, these planets have to oppose the beginning of Libra, I should say. They're going to be opposing Saturn, Neptune. Oh, yeah, it will be at the end of Virgo. So they got to go through that little gauntlet. And then finally, we're starting to get into the period of time where as planets are moving into Scorpio, they've got to tangle with this square with Pluto. And then Chiron, that's why they're in here too somewhere, because they're at the end of Aries. I'm going to put them back. Clearly, I was trying to clean up my chart a little bit. Yeah, it'll be that same time that planets are squaring Pluto. Right before that square with Pluto, they're also going to be having to go through this opposition with Chiron. So there's these few sticky points where planets have to move through the beginning of Virgo, that change into Libra, and then that change into Scorpio. Right now, there's some outer planet stuff that is happening. And a lot of all of that is happening between the 16th and the 25th of September. So 16th through the 25th of September are kind of my take care of yourself extra, take care of others extra. There's a few, mind your own business days in there. But it's because of those things, those wider kind of paths. We talked about Mercury, we talked about that. The ends and beginnings of a lot of signs are difficult this month. Again, the beginning of the month with Mercury too is going to be, starting in a few days here as I record this on the 29th of August, maybe by the 1st, we can start just kind of pretending like it's a Mercury retrograde for a few days. Mercury's got to go through this square with Uranus. And then on the 2nd, that's when that's going to perfect on the 2nd of September. And then by the 3rd, Mercury's past Uranus. But we might be dealing with some interruptions, disruptions with communication the first couple of days of September, even end of August. Some disruptions in any of our mercurial things that Mercury's in charge of in our chart. So for this theoretical Scorpio rising, they might be having interruptions at the beginning of September with their friends or groups or their taxes or debt or something. So watch for that. And then besides that happening as the month opens up, the other big thing is Saturn. So Saturn got into Pisces March of 2023. And then in May of 2025, they went into Aries. They've been in here May, June, July, August. So then September 1st, Saturn is coming on back to Pisces for their last rodeo, their last barbecue. And we'll be dealing with some unfinished business. A moment of reprieve maybe from Neptune, but I don't know how much. They're still so close by degree. So has anyone, now this is another optional question. You do not have to answer this if you're here, but if you're comfortable, I've been noticing Saturn in Aries. Have you been noticing Saturn in Aries? Anyone? Anyone been noticing that vibe shift? It's been spicy. For those of you who listen to me regularly, you've been hearing me whine about how spicy it's been. Also, I think it's going to be a little bit more poignant for Capricorn and Aquarius risings because they have Saturn as their ascendant ruler. So, maybe I'm noticing a little bit more. Saturn's a time lord for me this year. So maybe I'm noticing it a little bit more. But man, my patience way down. The amount of times in my brain I just keep saying with Saturn and Aries, just do it. It won't take that long. It's like this old person in my mind saying, just get to it. It won't even take you that long, regardless of how much time it's going to take. So I've been noticing that. I have had more initiative in those ways. I have not been as kind. My kindness down, patience down. No offense to Aries. If you have Aries stuff in your chart, in your birth chart, you've had your whole life to work with this. I haven't. So, I don't know, but that's coming back, eventually. February 13th is of 2026 is when Saturn's going back into Aries. I'm kind of looking forward to this. I don't even care that Saturn is coming back on my moon. That in and of itself is not fun. I'm sure there's going to be a problem with that. I'll take that one over the amount of spice I'm having to contain over here. Uh, oh, there are some comments, but I don't think it's about Saturn and Aries. Uh, Someone had a burst of creativity related to some other things. So you got someone who feels differently. They're Leo rising, so I'm an Aquarius rising. So we're bizarre world opposites. And they've been enjoying it in Aries, which would be then more your ninth house. Not mine's in my third. Saturn's in my third. So you've got Saturn in your ninth. Uh, yeah. And if you're trying to do ninth house stuff, it's gonna cramp your style, most likely, especially if you're a night baby. Yeah. Well, for the people who don't want it going back into Pisces, hang in there. You've got till February 13th. If you can just get your buns to February, then you don't have to deal with it for another 27 years or so. Oh, hello, Zach. Nice to see you. Let's see. Yeah, and this is kind of an interesting point too. Someone has an Aquarius moon. Um, if you have Aquarius or Capricorn planets that are ruled by that Saturn, then that's a shift in quality as well. Whether Saturn is in Pisces ruling over that Aquarius moon versus Saturn and Aries ruling over that Aquarius moon. And, it's going to depend too if it's Capricorn versus Aquarius because of the aspects. But yeah, it's something that lasts a long time. So we have the good news and the bad news is that we've got plenty of time to work with wherever Saturn is. We've got 2.5, 3 years to work with them in Pisces, and now we're going to have 2.5, 3 years to work with them in Aries and kind of polish that stone and see how we can operate it in these new terrains. But that's going on. And I guess last thing with Saturn. So both Saturn and Neptune are eventually going to roll back into Pisces. So by the end of the year, we're going to have them together again in Pisces. So really Saturn and Neptune, that conjunction is going to persist. And that is another thing that it it's pretty much about the same time that Saturn's coming back into Aries. It's February that completes or perfects. And then I think by the time we get more into March, April, beyond, slowly, 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 as Saturn starts to pull away from Neptune and we start to get some space between them. I mean, even by like May, June, we're going to have 10 degrees between them. We do have to walk through this fog a bit. So that's another whole element to what Saturn is experiencing here, and they will continue to experience the uncertainty, the lack of clarity, which is really annoying because Saturn is about realism, what is actually here, what's real, and Neptune is about what's not real. So, not having a lot of clarity around Saturn ruled topics, not having a lot of clarity in Aries, that's going to be I mean, there's going to be this co-presence until April of 2028, but at least by degree, I would love for Saturn to just get away from Neptune. And then we'll be able to see for better or for worse, more in quarter two, quarter three of 2026, what these things are going to look like. But until then, kind of taking the next two steps you know are skillful to take with Saturn stuff in your life. Might not see the whole plan. It might be hard to see the whole thing when there's not a lot of visibility when you're walking through fog. So that's all you can really do is take the next step and the next step. So that's going on. And on the 3rd, so September, or Saturn re-enters Pisces on the 1st. On the 2nd, Mercury enters Virgo. They're going to perfect that square with Uranus on the 3rd. And then on the 5th, we're going to have Uranus stationing. So they're going to start moving in the opposite direction. So now I think the most important thing to note with an outer planet stationing is that if you have any planets or points in the first degree or so of any of the mutable signs, so Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, that means that Uranus, who was maybe moving away from your 0-degree thing in a mutable sign, now they're going to be moving toward that 0-degree thing in a mutable sign. And then for those of you who have stuff at the end of Taurus, now Uranus is going to be coming back over those things. So we're at the end of fixed signs. So the end of Taurus, the last few degrees of Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, you're also going to be getting a little bit more juice from Uranus. Did I write down? Yeah, they're going to go back to 27 Taurus. So for anyone who has planets or points at 27 of the fixed signs or later, yeah, for the next several months, Uranus is going to be doing their last dance, their last rodeo with your Taurus stuff. So that rolling really 2016, it's a 7-year, no, 2018, it's a 7-year transit. And that 7-year transit of Uranus is wrapping up. Uranus is an agent of change. They do a lot of chaos. They do a lot of sudden change. They bring a lot of innovation and authenticity. I have heard Kelly Surtees say that Uranus transits are not comfortable, but afterwards you usually feel more authentic in that place in your chart. So, for this theoretical Scorpio rising, last 7 years with partnership might have been interesting, exciting, changey. And there's one little last blip there. Now, if let's say you've got your descendant degree, 23, Uranus isn't coming back there. But if you've got like your angles at late, this might be important. So again, look at your birth chart. That's going to make a big difference about this. But then as of November 7th, so that's when Uranus is going to get back into Taurus. So again, September 5th, Uranus stations. Early November, November 4th, no, November 7th. That's when Uranus is going to come back into Taurus. And then it won't be until April 25th of 2026 that they'll be coming back in Gemini. So November and then through April, they'll be in Taurus. So this is why part of 2025 it feels like such an in-betweeny type year. And 2026 is like, we're kind of off and running with some things. And it feels like that, I think, because we have all these planets that are doing these dances between signs that there's slow planets. So kind of going in between a little bit before they go for good into the next place. And also, I guess, last thing about Uranus stationing, probably going to be louder. Anytime a planet is not moving, they are just making their same presence known in the same place every single moment. So Uranus things, interruptions, disruptions, sudden shifts, all of that might be especially loud at the end of August into September. So be flexible as possible. And then we have our first eclipse. So on the 7th, we've got full moon in Pisces. So full moons generally shine the light on things. Um, there's this really great mutual reception by degree. And so at the very least, Cancer topics are going to be involved in this and the house topics involved with Cancer for you. So again, it's another eclipse that's not in isolation. Those Virgo ones having to do with either sign flanking them. And now this one, it's not just, about Pisces, it's also about Pisces and Cancer. And then someone made a point in the chat very astutely that this is an exalted Jupiter. They're really stable. This is the kind of growth that is more orderly and sustainable growth versus like Jupiter in Gemini, or even like the growth of Rahu is really not stable growth. It's erratic growth. It is growth in the wrong direction sometimes. But yeah, I think we can much more count on the growth or the expansion that Jupiter is doing in Cancer. And then we are getting this node of increase with Rahu. So something is definitely growing or expanding here, and the moon is illuminating that. And something is peaking and culminating and fruiting. And that fruiting, maybe you've been working towards something just for the last 2 weeks, but maybe also you've been working towards something, especially in like the Virgo Pisces part of your chart, and since like 6 months ago. So if you even want to think back to March, might be a little bit of a prompt to go back into your timing journals and diaries and calendars and things and see what was going on in March. And, this might be that September 7th full moon might really be emphasizing how far you've come in that 6 months with, say, this person's Pisces house topics. So that's a vibe. We do see Saturn here, so I am kind of wondering if there's going to be some kind of limitation, um, constraint, difficulty that's also going to be highlighted. There's this whole thing of the big dreams of Pisces, and Pisces having this vision for, how it could be. We have Jupiter ruling this place, thinking about the future and advancement versus the small process-oriented details, the daily stuff that gets us to those bigger places that is boring and mundane. That's kind of that's what's going on here. So what smaller processes are we doing to get to a vision that we might have? And then what challenges are persisting? What challenges are around? That might also be here. At the same time, though, remember we do have this really supportive note. Something is supportive. There's some remedy, there's some help, there's something. So, very potentially constructive eclipse. I mean, usually I don't think of eclipses as constructive because they're still unstable. I think of them more as like the next plot point along on a story a lot of times every 6 months. But this one does, it looks kind of constructive. It looks like there's a potential for constructive change, even if that change might be a little uncomfortable. So there's that. And then this kind of opens up our little eclipse window. That'll go till the 21st. And am I missing anything about this? We've got a great ruler in Jupiter, both Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury ruling the sun. They're both doing awesome. That's another stabilizing factor here for this eclipse. So great culminations, things that are coming into view. I'm looking at the aspects after. Yeah, there are some nice post-eclipse aspects that happen with Jupiter and Venus, especially after the moon gets out of their bond. And, it might be worth noting too that now the sun at this time is going to be with Ketu. And anytime the sun is with the south node, I usually am instructing people to take it easy. And I think it's kind of a good idea around eclipses anyway, just because like the sun and the moon are our vitality. It's like our life-giving light. And it's really necessary for life here on Earth. And when that gets interrupted, it's not great for vitality, right? And so if anyone's like doing yard work, if you're feeling tired, take a break. I wouldn't push it. Our vitality is being reduced over here with Sun and the South Node. And even like a few days after the eclipse, like I want to wait. I mean, Sun gets a couple degrees away from that by the 12th. So, around the eclipse too, physically speaking, take it easy if you feel like you need to. Listen to your body. And I think that's what I have to say about that eclipse. Right after, we also have this kind of nice Sun Jupiter sextile coming into view. So I really like in terms of days that I like this month, um, I am enjoying seeing this sextile here. I think that's going to be supportive. But even like then we get the moon into Taurus on the 11th, 12th. That's going to be making some nice connections. So the 11th, 12th, 13th, those were kind of my favorite days of the month. And then 14th, 15th, no comment. But again, the 16th through the 25th, those are the days of the month I'm giving a bit of side eye or skepticism to. Another thing about this month is a Venus-Mars sextile. That's especially strong in the middle of the month. So Venus-Mars sextile can mean that we're getting along better with people or we're able to move through conflict in a more healthy manner. It can be passion, putting motivation and action to what we really value or desire. It can be really, yeah, helpful for a lot of moving toward things you're passionate about. Less discord, especially with Venus in that overcoming position. Although I do like to think of Fire Venus as more of that warrior goddess externalizing Venus. And, especially once we get to the end of Leo, I have found I've been watching this for a few years now. And Venus at the end of Leo is a spicy warrior goddess. They are. And so, as much as I say, yeah, more harmony, less discord, might dial that back a bit. This might be spicy. Uh, so choose your battles wisely and have fun and good luck. But it could be very warrior goddess energy too at the middle of September. I'm gonna get rid of that wheel because it overwhelms my eyes. So that is going on around 10th, 11th, 12th. Um, yeah, I like the 11th. We got a nice Taurus moon. The one thing, there is a Mars Chiron opposition heating up. That heats up until the 16th. This is the one thing that like is kind of my favorite days of the month. This is kind of ruining a little bit. If I'm being picky, I know there's no perfect sky, there's no perfect election, but this is going on as well. Engagement really begins around like the 12th, 13th, and then by the 16th, it perfects and it starts to wane. So I'll have to say, like the mid-September, like the 12th through the 16th, especially in like the Libra Aries parts of the chart for you, that might be kind of tender. So handle with care, take extra care of yourself in those areas of life. So say for this theoretical Sag rising, this would be with their self-expression and their friends and groups, with their creativity and art and who they're sharing that with children and aspirations. So any of those things for Sag rising around 12th to 16th of September, be gentle with it. And then that clears up just in time for the planets to start doing their outer planet little gauntlets that we mentioned. But before we talk about the outer planet gauntlets, we do have a Mercury cazimi on the 13th. So a couple nice Taurus moon days, and then this Mercury cazimi, which is usually a day of clarity, especially around, it's going to be around Virgo topics or Gemini topics. Any kind of clarity coming in on the 13th, write it down if you need to. Trust yourself, believe yourself. It's a bit of a respite. Usually planets have a tough time when they're too close to the sun, but when they're within 1 degree like this, it's a little loophole. They get a little break, a little rest. Mercury is able to do Mercury things even better on the 13th. So this might also be a day to kind of sneak in and do a quick Mercury thing that you need to do. And yeah, it can just be a day of understanding things a little bit better or easier, or having good ideas. That could be a thing. On the 15th, the Venus Mars sextile perfects. And we get that at 25 degrees of Leo and Libra. Very externalizing, very expressive. With it might just be like a socially busy week or month, even with the sextile. On the 17th, 16th, 17th, we're going to have Mercury opposing Saturn, Neptune. And so the 16th, 17th, I know that that was within that realm of time to do Mercury stuff, and maybe I should have shortened it. Maybe I should have truncated that to the 14th because I don't like this. I don't like the 16th or the 17th for handing in applications, for asking for anything, for doing any submission of information where that information needs to be accepted and sent somewhere. I don't like the 16th or 17th for that. Mercury is facing the Lord of rejection and then the Lord of confusion, Neptune. And then that clears up by 12:47 p.m. Central Time on the 17th. So then after the 17th, we get Mercury, or after around noon, we get Mercury past that. So 16th, 17th, don't hand in your applications. Wait until after 12:47 p.m. Central Time on the 17th, which is 5:47 p.m. Universal Standard Time. On the 18th, Mercury enters Libra. They're going to oppose Neptune right away, but that's done pretty quickly. They are also losing their strength. They're going from a place of dignity to now they have had to hand back in their umbrella. They no longer have a chariot, and they are harmed by the sun's rays. So this is where communication might not be going very well. 18th looks kind of bad for 17th, 18th. Don't look great for communication. Doesn't look great for fine detail things. And then Mercury is done with that Neptune opposition by 5 p.m. Central Time on the 18th, which is 10 p.m. Universal Time on the 18th. So after 10 p.m. Universal Time on the 18th, then at least we get Mercury away from Neptune, separating from them. And at this time as well, we have Venus, who is now in an engagement with Uranus. So that's heating up. We get this a few times a year, some kind of hard aspect of Venus with Uranus. And this can be a time of independence or authenticity, wanting to come out in relationship. So wanting to be ourselves with our partners or our friends, wanting to express ourselves authentically, and maybe even have some independence or space. Sometimes we need space from certain relationships just temporarily when Venus is square Uranus like this. That is going to heat up when Venus enters into Virgo on the 19th. And yeah, I would say on the 20th, that's when that's going to be the strongest. Venus, Uranus square. So like 18th, 19th, 20th of September, if space needs to be had, hopefully not because of the miscommunication days we just had, but if Venus needs space, give them space. If relationships need air to breathe, give them air to breathe. If there needs to be something expressed with the authentic self, find a way to do that. Because with squares especially, there can be so much tension. And so the more we're trying to put a lid on that Venus and what they're trying to do and express, the more tension there's going to be. There could also be this square between, okay, maybe Gemini Uranus wants to say something, but Venus is like, this is not the time or place in Virgo. So there could be that tension there. But then finding some other place at some other time to deal with whatever wants to be expressed. Um, so that's a thing. So again, we have Mercury and Sun moving through this opposition with Saturn, Uranus, and then we also have Venus who's moving through this square, or sorry, Saturn and Neptune, and then Venus who's working through this square with Uranus. So all of this stuff kind of happening at the same time. This is why I looked at the 16th through the 25th as kind of the most active days of the month, or busiest, most interesting days of the month. Oh, let's see if anyone has any questions. Oh, that sounds nice. Someone's having a a nice Saturn in their third house, talking to aunts and taking long walks around their hometown. Yeah. Saturn will make a walk longer and will also have us talking to older people. So that is a real thing. Or we eventually will be the older people in the room. And then Jason says they're excited to see the difference between the Pisces eclipse from last year with an exiled Jupiter versus this time with an exalted Jupiter. Yeah, that is such a good point. Let's go look at that point. Okay, so this Pisces lunar eclipse that we have on the 7th, it is ruled by an exalted Jupiter. It's the best condition Jupiter can be in. And so we're going to get the best of Jupiter's goodwill, reconciliation, stabilization, expansion, growth, etc. We're going to get all of the best version of that versus, now this must have been March. We want any eclipse. I know we had one. Maybe it was the sun being ruled. No, this one here. Yeah, this one. Okay, September, September 17th of 2024. Okay, we have a lunar eclipse ruled by Jupiter. But Jupiter back then, last September, was in Gemini. Womp womp. So not as in good condition. The growth is now potentially scattered, erratic. It takes two actions to procure. It's more likely to have reversals or be less less dependable. So less dependable goodwill, less dependable opportunities, things that fall through, opportunities that maybe aren't suited for the environment or the space. So sometimes opportunities come and we can't take advantage of them. So yeah, kind of disappointing in a lot of ways. I am hoping that now this next one's going to be much better. Yeah, a girl can dream, we can dream. And I'm just very thankful for it. So I think it'll be an improvement. I mean, that's if I had to guess. I'm gonna guess that the results of this will be at least less shitty. Yeah, less shitty final answer. I've kind of stopped monetizing, so my swearing might go up more because I just find that monetizing on here, unless you do the shorts and like play the whole thumbnail game, which I just refuse to do. Hopefully no one's offended that I just use the same thumbnail every single time, pretty much, but I can't do that shit. I just can't do it. Let me see if there's anything else about this Venus and Virgo, though. So let's talk about Venus and Virgo. They're going through a square with Uranus. That's happening. And then they're also going to be losing some dignity. So Venus is about bringing things together. And now they're in a place of Virgo, which is much more likely to separate out and organize and compartmentalize things. There's a right or a wrong way in Virgo. There's an effective and a more effective, less effective way in Virgo. Venus, that's not always how they operate. They're more like, yeah, but does it smell good? Does it look good? So here we're kind of melding that function with form, the form with function. So at best, you get people who are craftspeople, and if they have this in their birth chart, people who are really good at creating high quality products with an attention to detail, even if that's their own dancing or their own food or whatever. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, but it can also be a spreadsheet that's beautiful. So whatever, there are ways these can come together very greatly, but it's not comfortable for Venus. They would like paintbrushes and watercolors, and they have been given a spreadsheet. So it's not their favorite toolbox to use, but that doesn't mean they're not going to do something cool with it. If you find yourself now with sensual things, sense things, taste, touch, smell, um, texture, if you're noticing, in September, end of September, more details, and those details are bothersome, yes, that is often a thing with Venus and Virgo because they're noticing all of the details. And they are going to be in here noticing all of the details until October 13th. So it's September 19th to October 13th that we'll have Venus in Virgo. And so take advantage of it for all of those, really beautifying in a detailed way kind of tasks. Exfoliate, sure, but don't pick at your face. That's like too much of the Venus with the Virgo. This is, when I've had Venus and Virgo moving through a part of my chart, this is where I'm rearranging flowers to get them just perfect until the point that they start to fall apart because I've been fucking with them too much. So, yeah, it's a whole spectrum of stuff. But that's what Venus is going to be doing in there. And the good news is that they're not really going to be bothered by Saturn when they're in there. They're not going to be, oh no, they will be. Just kidding. They're not going to be bothered by Mars. And then when Mars gets into Scorpio, it'll be by a sextile. So, it could be worse. Could be worse. I would also, I think this is more October, but yeah, the very end. So end of September into October with Venus and Virgo, last point, they'll be going through the South Node. That's another thing that all these planets are having to move through the South Node. So this can be that letting go, removing of something, setting down of something, and here it might be Venus related. So you might want to look too at the Taurus and Libra ruled parts of your chart, those house topics. Those might be getting a spring or fall cleaning. Those might be getting an exfoliation, whatever those areas of your life are. So it can be constructive a lot of times. I might be, Venus rules my fourth house of basements. I might, maybe I'll be cleaning the basement. And, this is a fun thing too. It's fun for me because I have a Venus on my first house. Venus is about cleaning. Venus is about cleaning. We're in charge of hygiene. And Mercury is in charge of details. And so I think we get confused sometimes with like the Virgo having like a method, having some kind of organization, even though it might not look organized to me, it's organized to them. But with Virgo, there is that kind of awareness of things in their right space and for the right use and efficient and accessible. It's not the same as clean. So I have many Virgo people, Virgo risings, Virgo moons, Virgo stelliums in my life. The Virgos, they find me. One example is my brother. He is a Virgo moon in his first house. He has a workshop that is incredibly filthy and incredibly organized. Everything has a spot, but it's filthy. But Venus is clean. So now this is deep cleaning mode, my friends. So maybe, if you can or have the privilege, clean your stuff. Clean your stuff between September 19th and October 13th. That would be a great way to use detail-oriented Venus. Okay, there. I didn't know I was going to go on that rant today, but I did. Venus in Virgo. And at this time, we also have, and this will help us to understand the second eclipse, we've got an exchanging of signs between Mercury and Venus very analogous to how we just had Sun and Mercury across Leo and Virgo. Now we've got Venus and Mercury across Libra and Virgo. So these rulers of these signs in each other's signs. The thing here, though, is that, and I hear this a lot, and maybe this is me being a pedant, but if there's no aspect, I do not count it as a mitigating factor. So we like to look at like a non-aspected exchanging of signs and call it a mutual reception, but there's not actually a reception because there's no aspect. And so while, a mutual reception like we had with that Pisces lunar eclipse, Pisces and Cancer exchanging, having their rulers exchange signs, that was a reception. This is an exchanging of signs. There's no reception. It's not going to be as helpful, but it will conflate, it will squish together all of these house topics. So, it's not just about Virgo during this time. It's also a little bit about Libra and what's going on in those parts of your chart. So that is another thing that's going on once Venus enters Virgo, then we really get entangled with Libra. And I think that does bring me to the solar eclipse at the end of Virgo on the 21st of September, at the very last degree. Whoa. So we've got 29 degrees, 5 minutes, versus the last one was at 0 degrees, some minutes. Now, the biggest thing for me here is that I know these are opposite Saturn, but they are moving away from Saturn. So that I like that. That I would interpret more as, okay, we had seen all these challenges during the full moon lunar eclipse, which PS, I am redundant, and I know I say that redundantly. It's like I'm saying avian bird flu. But when I was a beginning astrologer and I was a baby, El Bebe, it was really hard for me to remember which was which. I could not remember for the life of me which one was solar or lunar eclipse. So that's why I'm being redundant. I digress. Okay, this means maybe during that full moon, we saw the difficulties, the limitations, the constraints, the needs for improvement. I'm hoping that by these luminaries being separating from Saturn, that means the challenges are going to be in the past, in the rear view mirror, and we're moving away from those challenges. So that's my hope, but it is still very opposite Saturn. So there's kind of a bummer vibe here. We do have Benefics seeing, so that's nice. We've got some help. Even like the aspect that the moon makes after it gets out of the beams of the sun is going to be a square with Jupiter. So that gives us kind of a good aftertaste after what is maybe a bitter eclipse, a bit of a bitter one. So it's looking good afterwards. I know then the moon has to touch Mars, but we'll get there when we get there. Other than the Benefics seeing that, Uranus, are they seeing that too? They are. Not by degree, but certainly, yeah, being beheld by an agent of change. So there's still that note that something is changing, something's being shifted here. So great beginnings and endings. That's not something I haven't said yet. So wherever the Virgo, whatever house topics we have in Virgo, so for this theoretical Capricorn rising, this would maybe be around long distance travel, for instance. Great beginnings or endings around long distance travel. So what great beginnings or endings are going on in the Virgo part of your chart, and how might those great beginnings and endings be related to the house topics of Libra as well? So great beginnings and endings for this person around long distance travel, but maybe also having to do with their career or their life path. So again, not just in a vacuum, but that is what's going on there. Yeah, I'm so curious to see because, yeah, there's so many similarities with the August 23rd new moon with this one. It'll be really interesting to see how it's all tied together in a month from now. The rest of the sky is kind of yucky. I don't love this. I don't love the Mars-Pluto engagement that is beginning by square. Yeah, it can be at the least very irritating and irritable. At worst, it is violence and violence. So this is where around September 21st, 22nd, really till like the 24th, take extra good care of yourself. Be careful. Try to do one thing at a time. If things are feeling really intense or heated, remember that like adrenaline takes about 15 minutes to start to get metabolized by the body. So at least 15 minutes away from a tense situation to calm down. Um, Mercury's around in a very level-headed place. We've also got a lot of planets in another very practical place. So it's not like the rest of the sky isn't seeing this Mars-Pluto stuff and able to manage it or mitigate it a little bit. But yeah, it's still not my favorite eclipse I've ever seen. It doesn't it doesn't feel quite as stable or constructive as the full moon one in Pisces. And I guess last note about these eclipses for the purpose of this recording or this forecast is with Virgo. And again, I'm going to talk about this more in my other video. We have a very process-oriented, detail-oriented thing, and we've got a letting go. So there's going to be some theme about letting go of some detail or process or way of doing a thing, potentially, if it isn't just like getting rid of stuff in your basement or getting rid of like a physical thing. And sometimes these decreases, these losses with the South Node, or if we are letting go of something, I mean, one, sometimes you have to let go of like emotional stuff a billion times, not just once. Uh, but two, sometimes when we let go of stuff, it's temporary. Sometimes it's permanent. If it is, something that you're letting go of permanently, make sure you give yourself time to grieve. That could be very real and what this is about, especially with Saturn over here, who is also a lord of grief. And sometimes, depending on, it's not always like this, but with whatever's let go, and then there's more room or space or a void, something else can come in there eventually. Even if there's not anything that's ready to take that place right away, nature abhors a void or a vacuum, and something else will usually come in there. And hopefully something that'll feel aligned. That full moon eclipse at the middle of Pisces, Nine of Cups, where we're all about alignment and trying to like have our best life. So that's really what we're going for here. But some letting go of a detail or a process, or if you've created something, letting go of that final product. That is such a thing about the last decan of Virgo is it's like you've harvested the wheat, you've made the bread, you have the bread. It is as close to perfect as it's going to get, even though it's got this weird little thing over here that's not perfect. Um, it's time to give it to friends. And T. Susan Chang talks about this last part of Virgo, the Ten of Pentacles, and how, you might want to hold on to what you've worked so hard at, but it's almost like you're going to lose it no matter what. If you share it, there's a chance it could come back to you some way or energetically in some other way. So letting go and sharing what you've created can be tough with Virgo, but we might be asked to let it go in terms of that more constructive reality of, yeah, I have something to create and I have to let go of it. Um, I think that's all I have to say about that eclipse. And the Pluto-Mars square is done. It's done after the 24th. It perfects at 6:51 a.m. Central Time on the 24th. Oh yeah, and the moon's gonna be right there for it. Yeah, I just about fell out of my chair when I saw this. I was like, come on, man. Look at this. Uh, yeah, okay. So here we can see Mars at 1 degree, 27 arc minutes, exactly square. Pluto at 1 degrees of Aquarius, 27 arc minutes. And look at who's here right when that's going on. The moon. Isn't that funny? Like, I don't want the moon to be there for this. I want the moon to be somewhere else. So, like, you know, Take extra good care of yourself on the 24th. This is going to be in the early morning for the Western global time zones. For universal time zones, this is going to be more around 11 noon, 11 a.m. noon. And then the evening for the global, more globally east time zones, the further you go, the later in the night this is going to be. So let's just say like everyone's in the clear on the 25th, all clear on the 25th. But yeah, let's take good care of ourselves on the 24th. And that, I mean, honestly, the rest of the month just kind of fizzles out in terms of interest. There's not as much going on. All these planets have moved through the outer planet junk. Um, they're on their way onto their next things. Eclipses are done by this point, and then we get this Mars-Pluto thing done, and then it's pretty much less interesting after that. Uh, at the very end of the month, we get what was it? Yeah, the Venus Ketu. I think that was pretty much the biggest thing of interest to me at the end of September was just knowing that Venus is going to be going through that letting go, releasing, decreasing process. Venus is also going to be going through a more immaterial and spiritual place. This could honestly be a good time to connect with ancestors with that kind of thinning of or blurring of boundaries in an immaterial sense with the South Node. Well, maybe I'd like to connect with people over that blurry boundary materially if I need to ask an ancestor a question. So you could do that maybe. That would be a one way to leverage what this is in a cool way. But more materially speaking, it could be that letting go of things and even just practical things like the way that you organize your pantry. Maybe you're going to organize it in a different way. So that's at the end of the month. I think that is it. I think that sums it up. Yeah, that was a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, and 28th. 28th was another day where like maybe don't hand in your application for anything important. Moon's going to be running into Saturn and Neptune by square when it's at the end of Sag. Again, that's on September 28th. So, 28th, not a great time to hand in stuff. Wait until not the 28th. All right, friends. Another record time. I can't believe it's only been an hour and 15 minutes. Good job, me. Thanks everyone for your comments. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you wanted me to look at? Last call for anyone who's here. If there were times or dates you wanted me to look at that I did not, I can go back to that. Yeah, we got a Virgo stellium in the chat. They got Mercury and Venus in there, and they say they are messy, but all organized in their head. That is exactly that. I am convinced that it is. It doesn't have to be organized to someone else. It just has to be organized to that Virgo person. So I don't think like, because then people who have Virgo stuff, they think, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I messy? I'm supposed to be, have prim and proper and everything perfect. And it's like, no, not necessarily. Like, do you feel like it's really organized? Did you spend a lot of time organizing that? Yeah, it counts. Totally counts. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for yeah, everyone's comments. They were so helpful. It's good to see some familiar faces. Okay. And a little outro note here. Actually, I should have started with this. I think I forgot to do I was good about it for a while, and then I kind of fell off on highlighting mutual aid of interest. So if you're in America and you have the ability or the funds, the Bail Project is a really good one, bailproject.org. But then I also have learned that different states have their own bail funds sometimes, like different states, there'll be independent people or organizations that will have one for their state. So you can Google that, find that out. And then the other mutual aid kind of charity highlight, whatever you want to call it, Doctors Without Borders, because there's a lot of places that are in trouble and they help a lot of those places. So that's another good one that I can shove people toward. And of course, all of the other mutual aid, local, small mutual aid things that come up to the best of our ability. And I ask that we all take care of ourselves because we cannot pour from an empty cup. So, uh, not feeling bad if you need to take care of yourself and rest and regroup so that we can all fight another day. I think that's the goal. Sustainability. Sustainability. And if anyone has any questions, my email is aligninglight@gmail.com. I am about 5 days, 4 days behind on my inbox right now. Usually I try to be at inbox 0, which I'm very proud of. But yeah, not ahead right now. So hang in there if you're waiting in my inbox. But please send me an email if you have any questions. And then I have a sliding scale. That's my last thing. If you meet the requirements, which there's a lot of people who meet the requirements. Check it out on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. I have it in the FAQ section and the About Me section, all about my sliding scale, who qualifies, what it is, how to do it. And I have that there. And it's my way of giving back. It is also my way of making this accessible because I feel like astrology is very important and everyone should have access. So check that out if my prices are a bit prohibitive. Other than that, yeah, schedule a reading. I do birth chart readings. I do forecast, individual forecasting, all this, but tailored to your chart. Trying to do this is actually, I've been saying it more, it's kind of a fool's errand because everyone has such different timing, right? And different planets are going to be prioritized during different years of your life. But if you would like more tailored forecasting, you can do a session. And I use all kinds of tools. I don't have a lot of like special offerings that have special names. I just bring my whole honkin' toolbox of like 8 timing techniques to every single appointment. And then it's my it's the art and the science of astrology to know which of those tools to use for which questions and which to put together to paint the picture that is going to show the path ahead at the most accuracy. So I know there's not a lot of options. It's like birth chart or forecasting, but I also have a beautiful intake form where you can write in that intake form whatever you want, just like what you need from me. So, and then if, I don't know, I have pretty good customer service. I email a lot. I think that's all. I think that's all of my stuff. In about 36 to 48 hours, the eclipse video will be out. Please check that out. It's going to be good. And then just take care of yourself for the eclipse season. I, yeah, I don't have any recommendations beyond my usual. If you've been listening to me for a long time for eclipses, I really like to go by, if you're a member of Sphere and Sundry, you got to be a member of the Sphere and Sundry community. So you got to sign up for that. But if you do, then there's access to Caitlin Kopic's eclipse remediatory activities. And I talk about it every 6 months because I love it so much. And so I look at it every 6 months. People ask me all the time, like, what do you do for eclipse? How do you prepare for eclipse? Mostly I'm taking a lot of baths. It's a lot of baths, a lot of salt baths. So it's not too exciting over here. I make some purple sticky rice. I put it on the altar right there. It's not too much, but yeah, check that out. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Have a good September. I will see you at my next office hour. That's the second Thursday of September. It'll be September 11th at 7 p.m. Central Time.